Hey guys, Ark here, bringing to you Chapter 2, Episode 2 of my Learning Night Elf series. This episode, we're going to be starting the Night Elf versus Undead matchup. So what I want to do with Chapter 2 is essentially do a couple of the common strategies that can be used against each race, and just kind of detail them on what are the key things to look out for, where are your decisions going to be made at, and just kind of the general game plan. So mentioned this is going to be versus Undead. So the first strategy that we're going to be playing up against is, I call it 10 Fiends build, but when I say 10 Fiends, I'm basically saying anything that involves an early graveyard. And so while this is a Night Elf series, it's really important to understand what the other races can do, because you're going to make your decisions based off of what you see in terms of scouting and game plan from the opponent. So you really have to kind of have a fundamental understanding of typically what are the races going to do against Night Elf. You don't really need to know what the other races are going to do against other races, but at least against Night Elf, you need to know what the opponent can do or what they might do. So this is a Night Elf versus Undead game on, let's see, looks like Last Refuge. This is a game that I played about 10 days ago, maybe, or so, somewhere around 10 days ago. I believe, yeah, I do end up winning this game. Regardless of whether I win or lose, though, the key things that we're going to watch for, we probably won't watch to the end, but I'll just kind of give you the timings and everything. So with that said, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the game. Let me just switch this over real quick. Fancy. I did update a little bit of my displays and everything, so feel free to let me know what you think or some suggestions you have with it as well. So mentioned this is Night Elf vs. Undead on Last Refuge. I am on my East account. This was not a BNet game, it was just a custom game, but so we're going to go ahead and put this to 2x and unpause as I'm talking. So at this point, I am basically following Chapter 1, Episode 1, the Night Elf Archer opening, as well as my AOW episode, which I believe is Chapter 1, Episode 8. So up to this point, if you have followed the Chapter 1 series, you will be able to get to this point pretty confidently. So I'm actually going to go to BNBNA with no Fog of War. Basically, I just want to be able to see the white. It's hard for me to see the blue on the background. So I'm doing Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter is typically how I open against Undead. Against Undead, I occasionally will go Keeper of the Grove. I think it plays very similarly, or at least how I play Keeper. I think the opening is very similar, but obviously the Undead will be playing a little bit differently. So essentially, my game plan with Demon Hunter, it's going to be dependent on what I scout. So I have this Wisp here. I do a relatively typical scout timing with this Wisp. You can see that his hero is out at the time, so he would be able to deny it. But ultimately, what this scout is doing for me is one, I'm trying to look for cheese play. So whether that's what I consider cheese is like Dreadlord fast expand, or some weird fast expansion, or even some weird tower rush, or some heavy ghoul play, ghoul rush or something like that. Basically anything out of the ordinary. The other thing I'm looking for is a graveyard. So if he builds the early graveyard, I'm going to assume that he's doing an early transition to Fiends. It's not always the case, so you still need to be aware that he could still continue ghoul production if he's trying to trick you out or something. The other thing I'm looking for is his hero, which I guess is kind of tied in with cheese play. But yeah, so it's really just those two things that I'm looking for. As long as I see those two things, I consider the scout to be successful. Now, one is going to be highly dependent on a number of games played. I've played against so many different cheese play styles as Undead that I can see minimal information and kind of make the leap of, okay, I think this might be going on. I need to do this additional scouting to kind of determine that. So one is going to be really difficult to determine right off the bat until you've played a lot of games. Two is pretty obvious because you're just looking for a building. So we're just going to unpause here. And actually, did I not see that? From what I recall, I did see it. Let's just speed this back up.
Your building is complete. Your building
So
is
I'm looking for the graveyard. I'm gonna pause it because I'm almost there.
Our
So
warriors have engaged the enemy.
yes, I do see the graveyard with that wisp. So that was the key there. So I did see the graveyard, and at that point, personally, what I think is really strong to do against a fast graveyard. I know that there's going to be less ghouls than there typically would be. He's going to tech faster. What I think is really safe to do is immediately throw down an expansion. So if we see what I'm doing here, basically my opening is the same right now, but watch what I do. So I add this second wisp right here, so that's going to give me the 22 out of 30. If you've watched Chapter 1, Episode 1, you know that I typically would tech at 21 out of 30. So this is an extra wisp for me. So what am I going to do with this extra wisp? Well, I'm going to use it to expand. It's gonna offset the wood cost for the expansion as well as the general expenses that you have as you're teching. So I'm still teching fast, so I'm not really delaying my tech too much. I just delayed it by the build time of one wisp. But I have this extra wood income that I'm gonna be able to utilize a little bit, and then I'm gonna throw down an expansion as soon as I can, essentially. So there it goes. So the expansion comes down. So if we see what he has, so he was opting to creep with just the skeletons. So he used his coils to kind of creep with that. He's got 4 skeletons and a fiend. There is absolutely no way he can pressure my expansion. He might scout it, but unless he runs straight to there, he's not going to really be able to do anything. And if he does run straight to there, I've got 2 archers already with a 3rd on the way, and then a 4th one building. This is very easy to defend. He's going to only have a couple ghouls. It's going to be really difficult for him to be able to cancel that expansion. So this, I think, is a really safe timing for that expansion. And I started building my moonwells. So just to recap, I delayed my tech by 1 wisp once I saw the graveyard, so that I could then use that wisp to build an expansion as I was teching to tier 2. This gives me a way to creep up my second hero pretty fast, as well as to get an early expansion without really delaying me too much. And then I'm going to offset that by playing super aggressive. So I know that he's not going to be able to creep pretty early on. And so that's why basically you want to try and creep his side of the map when he has... this is basically his weak point in the game. You want to try and maximize the damage you can do to him during this period. So I'm creeping on his side of the map, which is going to make it really hard for him to creep his DK as well as his second hero later on.
I stand ready.
So we're just continuing on. I'm almost on tier 2. So this is going to look very standard. So I'm getting my Hunter's Hall when I'm about halfway done with my with my tech, which means that I'm going to be able to build lores right as soon as tier 2 hits. I'm getting my 3rd Moonwell. This 3rd Moonwell was delayed slightly due to the expansion, but it's not that big of a deal. So ultimately, when you hit tier 2, you're going to be looking at 40 food or out of 40 food. But everything else is going to be the same. Now you are delayed slightly because of that extra wisp that you buy.
Our warriors have engaged the enemy.
It doesn't really matter too much what's going on right here. Basically, my goals at this point is to stall his creeping as much as possible while stealing his creeping as much as possible. This is a very micro-based fight right here. So it's very easy to get out microed and lose archers here, but basically what your focus is going to be here is to save as many archers as you can. This is only successful if you don't lose units, because if you lose units, it's giving him experience that you're trying to deny, while also weakening you at tier 2 and on, which means that when he scouts your expansion, if you've lost those units, it's very difficult for you to defend kind of an all-out rush at that point. So you need to save units, you need to deny experience. And basically this is going to continue on up until I'm tier 2. And as I'm tier 2, you can see that this expansion here is going to be almost finished. So I'm almost tier 2 right now, and this expansion is about 4/5 of the way done. So right when I hit tier 2, I'm backing off. I'm going to be looking to get my second hero. Well, actually, I'm continuing the harassment because up until the expansion is done, I don't really have any reason to back off. So luckily, I jacked him here, but this might look like I guess pretty lucky. But again, I'm following the idea that I want to creep his side of the map. I want to stall his creeping as much as possible. Up until I get the expansion, there's no reason to go back unless you're losing units or something like that, because you're not going to get as big of a benefit on your side of the map. So that's the important things up to this point. Now I have my second hero. I have a level 3 DH, which is really good. He's level 1, so I'm entering tier 2 with about as big of an advantage as I possibly can. So at this point, I've hit tier 2. I build another Wisp. I throw down a lore. Basically, my big buildings here are going to be the 2 lores and the wonders. What you're going to want to do, though, against the fiends, you're going to need bears to really kind of defend it. It's difficult to defend with just dryads. So you want to build the 1 lore that you're going to be looking to tech, and then throwing down the second lore. This is going to give you a pretty fast bear timing. So you'll see here, I'm about to do that once I get the gold. Bam.
Our warriors have engaged
Bam.
the enemy.
Okay, well, so I'm a little late on it. Basically, I'm Tree of Life creeping the gold mine so I can throw this down. Going to be getting close to my level 2 on my Naga. I was a little late on trying to harass his creeping here, so he is actually going to creep the item shop and get it, but effectively, because I'm level 3, I'm just trying to still be annoying while creeping up my second hero faster. And so this is going to get the gold mine, and I tech right here, and then my next buildings you're going to see are a lore and probably a wonders. So at this point, I feel really confident in where I'm at. So he's teching to tier 3, he's getting a slaughterhouse, but I have this gold mine here, a pretty sizable army, a good position to creep another strong camp. So I'm basically trading the Merc camp, his gold mine, my gold mine, for the item shop, or item shop and Goblin Lab. But I have the expansion. So creeping wise, I'm pretty far ahead simply because of my early game. I've stolen so many camps from him that he's creeping these big camps, but he's still going to be at a relatively low level. Whereas I'm going to be creeping these camps and going to be getting my 4-3 or so on my first and second hero. So at this point, I know that my timings I need to watch out for are basically going to be when he hits tier 3. It's too late for him to really do any damage with some earlier rushes or anything, simply because my early game. So what I need to do is prepare for that attack, because that's going to be where I'm at my weakest before my expansion really kicked in. So I'm going to getting my first lore units, and then you're going to see me transition pretty quickly over into bears. And I throw down the wonder so I can get my staff and orb once I hit tier 3. And I finish creeping, I continue creeping this. I got my 5 archers. I'm going to be getting pretty high level. So this is making me pretty safe overall if he chose to attack like right now, which would be kind of ridiculous for him to do. So if he attacked right now, because of all my saved archers and my early game, it's really safe for me to defend. So right now I'm just continuing creeping. I basically want to creep as fast as I can. And as you see, I'm transitioning over into bears. So at this point, from my perspective, my weakest point is going to be right at tier 3, right before bears come out. Or at least even with those first few bears as they're out. That's going to be the point where my expo hasn't really kicked in. So I just need to focus on defending against that. So again, this all hinged on the fact that I saw an early graveyard right here. So that early graveyard dictated my early expansion. It basically dictated all my timings and how I was going to play the game. Typically, against any undead standard play, I would pretty much play similarly to this. If they have heavier ghouls, you kind of have to play a little bit safer until you get a big enough archer count that you can take down the ghouls pretty easily. But that'll be a different video. With this one, we're going to call it quits. This is the early graveyard undead, Night Elf versus Undead. If you have any questions, post it down below. We'll be continuing this, the Undead matchup in Chapter 2, Episode 3. Thank you, guys.